Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Tone Talk with Mark Uzansky and Dave Friedman. It's episode 107, and we've got Rich Renken from James Tyler Guitars. What's up? How you doing, Rich?
Great.
Awesome. Great to have you, man. Dave, how are you?
I'm perfectly fine.
Cool. I want to welcome everybody to the show watching. Make sure you check out sweetwater.com. All right. They sponsor the show. They give us a little kickback, a little commission on anything that you buy there. And it helps the show. It helps us keep the podcast going, helps motivate, each one of us to get up and do the show. So, no, I'm just kidding. We really appreciate it. And Sweetwater's got a lot of great stuff, and they have some exclusives right now. So check out all that's going on there. It's Guitar Month, I think, for September. So, and with that said, James Tyler Guitars, Rich Renken. What's going on, man?
Hey.
You're in your studio?
Yeah, nice to meet you, Dave.
Rich and I go quite a ways back.
Yeah.
How far back would that be?
Well, so my story with Tyler starts in 87, about the same time that you were getting into
so I probably would have met you at some point in time when I was working at Andy Brower's.
Exactly, because you knew Bobby Hartree.
Yeah, we started doing work and stuff together, and but even probably in passing, delivering some instrument or something, or doing something at Tyler.
Yeah, exactly. No, we
happened
for sure met back then, because I was there from 87 to 94, and
right.
But yeah, we met then, and then just for folks watching, just me and Dave, I was in a few different bands with this guy, Bobby Hartree, and one of them was called Almost Ugly, and Dave really liked coming down to those shows. So, and we played at the Coconut Teaser all the time, which was great because you could offload your gear and then hang out instead of like putting your gear on the street at the Whiskey. And then once you get it in your car, you're like, I'm going home.
Yeah, the cool thing, there was a patio where the stage was next to the patio, and so they'd offload the gear into the patio, but there were chairs outside in the patio, so you could sit by your gear and hang out outside and have a beer or whatever.
That's cool. You see, I like that idea.
And then you could offload out of the patio, when you had to go.
Yep.
That club's long gone. Many a different place has gone in that same location since.
It makes me a little sad every time I drive by.
I ate at one of the restaurants that had been in there at one point, one high-end restaurant.
Was
it weird? I'm like walking around going,
Was the basic layout the same?
No, they pretty much gutted the inside completely, so it looked like a different place.
Yeah. Because you remember it was like an old house, and I used to play
patio though. The patio was still out there, but they had decked it.
Yeah,
put a whole deck down the side and out there, and there was an outdoor bar.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember which restaurant this was at the time or how many years ago now.
Yeah,
sometime in the last 15 years, I went there.
Yeah. It was a special place. I played upstairs a bunch, and then there was a little one downstairs that I played in with the band called for a bunch of times. So that was a blast.
Yeah.
Back when I used to play, Now I just want to watch movies and lay in bed and watch TV shows with the wife.
Well, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that either.
Or be a recording engineer like you are.
Yeah. No, I love that. I've it's funny. I came so talking about my story. How I ended up in Los Angeles is I was in a Christian band back in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Oh boy.
Yeah, you want to pull that picture up of like me in a red and black outfit?
Sure, let me get it.
Because the guitar player playing the Les Paul is Brian Karlstrom, and I think, did you ever meet Karlstrom and Dave Jordan, Dave?
I don't think I've ever actually met either of them, but
I didn't know.
But yeah, of course I know who they were, and
I
remember delivering stuff to Dave Jordan's place.
Yeah, El Dorado and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Come back.
I'm gonna share my screen, see if this works.
So I can't. So Brian and I, so like all bands, we were like, yeah, let's go to California, and that band was, that band was, we loved like Toto, and I came out here to go to Dick Grove School of Music. The keyboard player on the right went there, and he checked out MI and Dick Grove, and I didn't know anything about Lukather going there or Michael Landau. I mean, I knew who those guys were just from sessions and all the records that we loved in the 80s. Yeah, that's
me right there. Okay.
We're playing at Rapid City High School, and kids were yelling, "Sid Vicious lives!" And the drummer, he's a doctor now, and in Minneapolis, but he was in the McDonald's All-American band that plays, two big parades, and out of 100 kids, out of all the kids that play in bands, he was a good drummer. If he would have came out here with us, he would have been doing sessions because he could read music, played, as we called it, trap back then. But Karlstrom came out here, and he went to Los Angeles Recording Workshop. Now it's LA Recording School that's owned by the film school. And he got his first gig at Track Record when it was on Melrose. And that's when I started getting into engineering. I mean, I ran sound for my mom's high school band. And I always loved, like, when I would ride in my mom's 67 Chevelle in the early 70s, I would pull myself up. I just remember always holding the dash to get my face as close to the speaker as possible. I watched your Rick Hollis thing, Dave. And when you talked about those early, like, I don't know what got me into it. I just remember I was fascinated by stuff other kids were not fascinated by. So, and I would, like when Van Halen came out, I didn't know anything about engineering, really. I was messing around with it, but I knew how to tweak knobs. But I would pull the speakers around my head and just go, what is going on? Why does this sound like massive? Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah. Oh, reverb over here. That's it. And then I try it and it doesn't work.
We had the pleasure. Well, that's the reverb's in stereo, actually.
Yeah.
We had the pleasure of we were at Pete Thorne and I were at Sunset Sound doing some IR captures for our upcoming 2 Notes packs.
Nice.
For 2 Notes Captor X's and or any 2 Notes product. And so we're like, can you pull up the chamber? The echo chamber, we're in Studio One, and the engineer guy, patches it in, pulls it up, and Pete had a guitar amp going just to make sure that, till we listened to every speaker in every cabinet first, figure out which speaker we were going to actually use, and pulls up that echo, and you're just like, oh my God. Can we see it? Can we see it?
I'll be right back and get it down there. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm going right now.
Yeah. And can we see the echo chamber? And so it's literally they take a panel off the wall in the control room. Behind these panels is a door, an old, like, one of those like 30s like freezer door kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
And you open it up, and there it is. As soon as you walk in, you say anything, it's just like, ah. And it's like two RCA ribbon mics, up really high in the room like this, at the end, and just pointing at a old looks like Altec kind of sound of the theater kind of full range PA thing. Holy crap.
That was the part that blew me away, was that it was right there in the studio. I thought it was going to be like some separate room.
It's not that big either, to be honest, but it sounds massive when you walk in.
Exactly, yeah.
And literally, if I was in that studio, I'd be like, oh, let's put it on the vocal, let's put it
right, put it on everything.
It'd be on everything.
Stereo mix.
Yeah, right. Everything.
That's hysterical.
But it was that was awesome. I mean, it was awesome to see. It was fun to do.
I love that you're working with Guillaume and company, because I love those guys. They flew me to France after KRK moved to Nashville, and I got 5 kids here. Me and Guillaume were talking about doing stuff together, and he's like, "Dude, we gotta at least fly you over here." Well, what's funny is he he wanted to see, we were figuring out if I would be a fit for his company. So he sent me a bunch of products, and he sent me the Captor 8, and he sent me the what's the white box that
the
doesn't
little pedal M something, or
The
so he
Cab
sent
M.
me that.
Cab M.
It has the Cab M. Yeah. And I go down to Hartree's, and we plug in, we're doing all kinds of stuff, and we love the load box, you know, and his deluxe, and it sounded amazing. I go, are you sure it's louder than that, Bob? Because it was still good loud, but it wasn't killing me. And he said, dude, switch it. And I switched, and I was like, oh, wow. It kept the tone. And then we plugged in Cab M, and we were messing with that, and that was cool. And I'm sitting there looking at Bob, and they should put Cab M in this Captor X and like make that a thing. So I got on
there you go.
Yeah, I got on a Zoom meeting with Guillaume, and I said, you know, dude, this would be a huge opportunity, I think, for you, is to take that and put it in that. And he literally pretend this is the Cab X. He goes, like,
that sounds like
cooking shows. It was like,
We've already done it. Yes.
So we knew we were kindred spirit, and he said, dude, you get this stuff, so I want to fly you over here, and you know, let's do some videos and for the launch of this thing. So I had a blast. I had never been to France before, and he fed me this food called aligot. I'm a very picky eater. Ask Jim Tyler. I will never ever eat sushi again, because our Japanese distributor is Kitahara, and Daisuke came over he worked for a different company, and he came over and wanted to get our business. And Jim goes, hey, should we take him out to steak, or should we go to sushi? And I go, well, if we flew to Japan, we wouldn't want them to take us to a steak place. You know, we're in Japan. Let's go to a sushi. So he said, okay, well, we'll take him to a good steak place. Okay, great. Which is good for me, because I'm a picky eater. And so they come in the door, and they had the same idea. They didn't want to take us to a steak place, because they're trying to wine and dine us. So they take us to their favorite sushi place. And I'm freaking out. And Jim's like, just sit next to me. You'll be fine. I'll get you the cooked stuff. Great. We get there. Jim sits down. Daisuke sits down. He goes, no, you sit over here by me. And he started speaking me stuff. And we wanted him as a distributor, so I had to play it cool. And I'm just, and of course, he's not letting me nibble and drink, you know, so I can force my way. No, whole thing in your mouth, you know. And I'm like, oh. And the next day I go into work, and Jim's like, I knew it. I knew you were going to dig sushi, man. And I go, it was everything I could do to just not heave. And so that's when I stopped being polite about food. So now I'm in France, and Guillaume's like, hey, my girl, and I want you to come over and meet my girl and my kid, and she wants to cook for you. And I'm like, oh, that's always even the most dangerous, because
then you're gonna insult them,
right? You know. So he goes, what? I go, I'm pretty picky. And he goes, what do you like? And I go, meat, potatoes, and gravy. I'm from Minneapolis originally. And he said, okay, I know just the thing. And I'm like, still like, okay. And I get over there, and aligot is mashed potatoes and this special cheese that's only in the south of France. He was explaining the whole lore. And it's slow cooked, and it's like taffy. And then you cook these sausages, and you cut the sausage, and you put the aligot on, and it's basically potatoes and gravy.
That sounds great. Yeah, I was going to say.
And I've been looking for you'd think in Los Angeles there'd be a place where it'd be like, we specialize in aligot, but I haven't found it yet.
Huh.
So, Rich, let's go to sushi.
No. You know,
I'll feed you the chicken teriyaki. Okay.
Actually, you nailed it. That's what I get when I get.
Yeah.
I do go
beef or something.
That's what my son does.
I love chicken teriyaki. I do love that. That and rice. And when I was in Korea doing the James Tyler Variacs, I was there for a long time, and they would always want to go to Korean barbecue. So I would cook my own little piece of meat, and I would ask for rice in the first place. And my buddy leans over and he goes, dude, asking for rice at a Korean barbecue is like going to, you know, Muzo and Frank and asking if they have any Wonder Bread. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not eating the rest of that. So
can I have ketchup on my steak?
Yeah.
Andrew Paul, we got a super chat from Andrew Paul, and it's from me. Mark, great recommendation last show on the Jeff Archer. It's awesome. Rich, Dave, do you need to install reverse taper pots when modding a lefty guitar? Thanks, guys.
Oh, Rich?
Yeah. Yes. I
In a
when
perfect world, yes.
Yeah, we get lefty pots when we build a left-handed guitar because we don't really mod anything. Jim got into. I'm wearing Norman's t-shirt. Jim's first gig outside of working on his friends' guitars was working for Norman way back in the day, and he was a repair guy, and that led to him having his own shop, and just kind of like your story, Dave, all these different guys, just your word gets out that you're the guy that, can help him get tone or get this or that, and that's when he met Mike and Lukather and Tim Pierce and Kevin Dukes. And, we got a list of the first bunch of Tylers, but so Jim was a repair guy. And that's what he kind of went to the point where, in the late 80s, everything was, he took, like a Strat at the time that wasn't worth much, like even an early 60s Strat, like Huff's main guitar, it wasn't that they weren't sought after yet. So he would take them all apart, take the frets out, put the flat radius in for the Floyd, put in Seymour Duncans and the switches and all this stuff. And he knew Seymour way back, they came up together. And so Jim would always be asking him, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And a lot of the stuff, that's still a staple at Seymour is stuff that him and Seymour worked on, and you know how it is. Like, I'm sure Jim was asking him and other guys were asking Seymour, hey, this and that. And it developed into these products. So he realized, look, I'm gutting these things. I'm taking if I just start with a body and a neck, I'm building a guitar. So he started getting like stuff from Kabicki, I forget where else. And then ultimately it was Tom Anderson, who's a dear friend. And I mean, I can't say enough about that guy. I love him to death. Like he, Jim looks back now at what Tom did for him and just the patience that, Tom, because Tom was at Schecter when it was, American made, and when it got bought or something. And by the way, I got to say something. These are just my recollections. Jim could get right on here and go, dude, what the hell are you talking about? So these are just my recollections. Don't write it down or, make it gospel. It's just me riffing with Dave here and Mark and having fun, talking. Actually, it's fun. We're kind of catching up because me and Dave haven't talked since COVID hit, really.
Probably the last time I saw you was maybe a NAMM show somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was NAMM 2020, So
your brother's here.
Oh my God, get out.
Brotherly love.
So a buddy of mine, and not to sidetrack, but I love the tangent. A buddy of mine took that picture that you used, Mark, when I was back home in April, and it's a good picture. And John goes, yeah, nice picture, but I'm still better looking. And it's like, dude, you've always been better looking.
That's brothers for you right there.
Yeah. But anyway, so he was a repair guy. So when I first worked for him in '87, I helped do a lot of repairs and stuff. But now we're just building. So when we build a left-handed guitar, I order left-handed pots. So I guess that was a long.
Where do you order them from? Who are you getting the pots?
Right now, I mean, Dave probably knows this. Like just getting stuff. You're
right.
It used to be, there's a bunch of great vendors, WD and All Parts. And, we get some stuff direct, from various, suppliers and stuff, but everybody's great. But you would kind of hone in on one just so that here's your order form. But right now it's like scramble. It's like
right now it's like, I guess we'll use those today.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
what? Oh, we can't get that part. What else can we use to keep stuff flowing out the door?
You can get 10 of those from Norway and pay too much. It's like, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. Boy, does it happen all the time.
C. Hester with the super chat. Thanks for the super chat. I think this is your question. What exactly is Mammy Woe?
Mamaiwu.
Mamaiwu.
Okay. Used to be a secret, but now it's not. And the funny thing is now it's expensive and hard to get. And the reason
Mamayu mystery wood, as it used to be
Malaysian
referred to.
mystery wood. Yeah, exactly, Dave. It was Malaysian mystery wood. What it is actually is jelutong, Jeltong, jelutong, and it's from Malaysia. And it's back in the 70s. Jelutong was used by all different industries to carve, because the way the grain is, it doesn't have, like ash. If you try and shape ash, you have to be really careful, because there's these hard spots and these soft spots. So you'll put it, an immediate dip where you don't want dips. Jelutong was used by like car manufacturers, airlines to carve out stuff and shape it and go, oh yeah, that's what it looked, because you could paint it real easy and look at it and see what you had before you started trying to fabricate it. And it was very abundant and very cheap. And some guitar builders would use it for the same thing, to kind of map out what they were going to do with the shape of a body or something. Well, Jim,
kind of like balsa wood.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And Jim built up a guitar with one, and he just really liked the characteristics of the mid-range. He just really liked what there was an openness to it, but yet like a low mid push or whatever. And so he started using it. Well, he didn't want to get made fun of. Like, dude, why are you using soap wood on your guitars? So like I make fun of guitar manufacturers, who use basswood. I call it ass wood. I personally don't like how it sounds, but people do, so same thing. So he wanted to hide the fact that it was jelutong, and he called it Mamayu, Malaysian mystery wood. But now the funny thing is I've tried this last year to find it, in quantities. I could buy, the only way to really do it is I would have to buy a container, bring it over, sort through it, find the stuff we could use, and hope to find somebody to buy the rest. And that's just, Jim loves alder, I
don't think it sounded that good to go to that trouble. I'm an alder guy.
Jim loves it too. And a lot of the stuff, the jelutong, mid boost and series parallel and all that stuff, it sounded, Jim's kind of got away from that for a while, because it was more about racks, speaking of racks,
sure.
With all the compressors and all that kind of stuff, you could do the
sound
series
of the times.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
series
it was
split parallel for each pickup.
Yeah. Yep. And the funny thing is now, it's that whole thing, what's old is new again, so now everybody's like wants the Studio Elites again, with all the bells and whistles, and because they're buying all these racks and stuff, it's young guys were into Landau and all those cats and back in the day, and now they have the money to get the stuff they wanted. It's not midlife crisis. We just have the money to get the stuff we wanted when we were kids,
Right.
Yeah.
Christopher DeRose says, damn proud of you, Rico.
I love that guy. Him and I worked together at Fernandez Guitars. And so I worked from Jim from 87 and 94. And then I left and I was a setup guy at Fernandez. And I ended up becoming the controller as the money guy, accounts payable and receivable and all that stuff. And Chris
forgot about that.
Yeah. Chris was my setup guy. I mean, my shipping guy. And today, when I'm the one right now packing up all the guitars going out the door. It's actually kind of nice to be away from the phone and be away from the computer and just put on an Audible book and just kind of space out and pack guitars. I really shouldn't be the guy packing guitars, but right now I am. And as I'm wrapping them, I do the tape like Chris showed me how, which we learned from a FedEx guy that knew, and it's just a way to keep the box secure, so every time I'm packing guitars, I'm thinking of this guy. So
that's great. We got another super chat from Alex C. Dave, love your gear and the support. The XLR outs on my JJ Junior and Run 20 is so superior to the old GT speaker emulator I was using. Do you ever see adding that to a larger wattage amp?
Maybe not the exact same thing, but there'll be other stuff in the future that may be even better than that.
Cryptic.
Yeah, cryptic. I say in the future because God knows with parts.
Yeah, that's true. Craig
It'd be
Sheehan.
more like, will you see a single knob amp in the near future? Maybe, because that's all I could build.
Single channel, one knob. That's it.
Yeah.
Craig Sheehan, can you describe Brad's guitar from Night Ranger?
You know, what's funny is I know that question's coming because I was at Fernandez, and he has an old Strat that's his main red and black Strat. Fernandez did basically a version of it to sell, and that was pre when I was there. But I became friends with Brad later, you know, so I was up to his place, and when I saw that guitar, when I was in college, I for an entire summer I had, hey kids, there were these things called cassettes, and you had to have a pencil to tighten up the tape. I had a Walkman that would flip, you know, automatically, and for an entire summer, Midnight Madness and Dawn Patrol were just back and forth for an entire summer. So to see that guitar in real life, I was like, oh.
There's some badass guitar playing on that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Just ass kicking guitar playing.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy they had big hits with like Sister Christian so they could pay their bills. But like the song Night Ranger, it was just
the solo one, Don't Tell Me You Love Me.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, I remember me and my buddy Marty, who I grew up with, you know, used to record all sorts of he would record videotape all sorts of remember those VHS?
Yeah.
Videotape all sorts of stuff that was coming on the cable box, the early cable box. I remember there was a service that was early on, at least in Michigan. I don't know if it was worldwide. I have no idea. It was an early cable service called On TV. And there was like some music channel or something where they had all these great concerts. And there was a whole Night Ranger concert that he had recorded where it was all live, and it was just that era, right? Early 80s. Yeah. That era, just ass kicking. And then there was a Billy Squier concert that he had, and all this other shit. Crazy stuff. And he still has all those videotapes. I think he's digitized a bunch of them now. But he has a huge collection of that stuff. And I'm like,
was On Music, was that a Canadian show that was shot in?
I don't even know.
I feel like
I don't remember what I barely. Some details of my life are missing.
Yeah. Do you know Chris Pooley, by the way, Dave? Huh? Do you know a guy named Chris Pooley from Detroit?
No.
Keyboard player? Oh, okay. Bobby Hartree, I'll talk about him a lot. He's like one of my best buds and probably my main musical collaborator in bands. And we did a bunch of records together. And, you know, one time I was unemployed after Fernandez. At one point they couldn't afford me anymore. And I started engineering and thought I was just going to be engineering. And I'll get into how I ended up at Line 6. But Chris was a guy that Bobby would hire a lot. We'd hire him a lot to do records. And the drummer was a guy named Aaron Sterling that now a lot of people have heard of because he's like one of the main session guys, and he plays with John Mayer. But Pooley is now Katy Perry's musical director, and he's the musical director on American Idol. And he was in Smashing Pumpkins where he met his wife, and he's just the sweetest guy. And he's from Detroit, and him and a guy named, oh my gosh, Ben Killer Writer. When I came through Detroit with Volto, Dave knows who Volto is. For those of you that don't know Volto, it's a buddy of mine, John Ziegler, who's just one of our favorite guys here in Los Angeles, who had a stroke a few years ago and is still working on recovering. I ran sound for them for like 14 years, and the drummer was Danny Carey from Tool, and Kurt Covington was the original keyboard player, and then we had Matt Rohde, who's just an incredible cat, and then John and Lance Morrison on bass. But we did a little short tour. They released an album that Joe Barresi did, and we went out and opened for Yes at a thing called the Yestival, and since we were way out there, we ended up winding our way back. And gosh, what was the club in Detroit? It was the
Token
booth.
Lounge.
No, it was bigger. It was the booth was way, like I had to go all the way up and then climb a ladder. And it was like up in the corner of this huge hall. And I thought, this is going to be ridiculous. But I got my mix and then I ran downstairs and
was
I went.
It like a theater, or was it?
Yeah, it was like an old beat up theater. And it was like kind of like the Wiltern is, where there's like 3 decks. I should, anyway, Ben met me at that show and helped me, unload the stuff, set up the stage and stuff. But so I had one day in Detroit. It was fun.
I've never been.
Hope much more fun now.
Yeah,
since they've cleaned it up and gentrified it more. And
yeah.
Captain Sexy 90. Thanks for the super chat. I have a Black Classic and a Studio Elite HD. I love Tyler guitars. Please talk about Coma and Puffy. Love from the Captain.
So again, this will just be my recollections, guys. It's me and Jim, we sit around all the time. And actually, since he's, getting up there in years and wanting to retire eventually, I'll bust out what we call the green book that has like the original. You want to bring up that picture? It's a bunch of names.
Yeah, sure.
So he's bringing up a picture that's like we called it the green book. It was just a binder. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to put on my glasses. That was the first 10
Todd Sharp,
11 Studio Elites and the first 10 basses. So Jim got the first one. That one ended up in Japan. But yeah, Todd Sharp, a guy named Rick Azum, killer guitar player. Everybody can probably guess Robin Ford. And then Jim had another one. And then Kevin Dukes.
Yeah, I knew Kevin.
That cat. And then he built one for Bob. And then that's Puffy right there, number 8. And I forget what the first Landau guitar would have been. I don't remember. That might have been the Midnight with the maple neck. If me and Jim
there was a whole bunch of things though that were modified things too that he had.
Oh yeah, no, this is the Studio Elite. So Coma was. I thought it was something else, but do you remember?
Coma was a red Strat that was then stripped of its color at some point in time.
Yeah,
it was like a pinkish color by when it was done.
Well, he wanted the paint off, and Jim wasn't interested in doing it, and or didn't have time or whatever. So Jim actually gave Mike a can a thing of acetone, and he stripped it all down. And then it just kind of the red soaked into the thing, but he kind of liked it. And then people started drawing on it and signing.
And then he got a Tyler neck on it at some point, I think.
Yeah. Jim. So Jim did that thing we were talking about. He put a Floyd on it, all those series parallel with the Duncans and the whole thing. And it was that way for a long time. And then, people stopped liking Floyd. So I think one of the first things was it switched to a Wilkinson bridge. And that's when I think it got the Tyler neck because, the
old neck had the Tyler sticker on the headstock, but it was a Strat neck.
Yeah. And you can find that on the internet. Everybody's seen that. It hung in the shop. In fact, not famous, but the picture I always see of the headstock online is one that a guy named Daryl Smith, who hired me at Line 6, took when we were doing the James Tyler Variax. We went over to the shop and we took a bunch of pictures of just fun old stuff. So Coma went through a bunch of iterations, and now he's still playing it. I ran sound for Mike and Steve Gadd and those guys. I've been helping out at the Baked Potato. If you guys don't know what the Baked Potato is, go Google it and get on their mailing list. They're going to go live with a bunch of on-demand stuff. That's going to be all these great shows, and you can actually still go watch that Steve Gadd show. It's basically the James Taylor band. So he was playing Coma, and he's like, "Oh, Rich, come here, look at this." And in the cavity, I forget what it says. I have a picture of it, but it's like something delish. Like Jim wrote this little note to Mike in there, and that's
I've seen it.
Yeah, so
I don't remember what it was, but yeah,
it was some. Those guys, all those 80s guys, all had their own, like they named their bands like Dog Cheese, and it was all this like insider hilarity that they all got, but I was always like,
Right.
And then Puffy was just a studio elite, and
that was the crazy paint job one, wasn't it? Where it kind of
Jim Burst. It's the
three tri-burst or something,
yeah.
Right? I remember that guitar.
You know what's funny is I even asked Jim. I said, "How did you first come up with doing a Jim Burst?" He's like, "I don't remember." You know. So, but yeah, it's the blue to magenta to red, and but it had Jim's pickups, which were we would get bobbin material, and we would we would build the pickup up, and then Tom would wind them up for us, and then we'd get them back and finish it off because we just didn't have the winding machines. And because then we could wind up, Jim could wind them the way he wanted them, and it had canceling coils for each of the single coils, so you could do the series parallel. Because Dave, like in the 80s, probably because of all the compression and all that stuff, any kind of buzz or noise, it was like, no. Now we kind of like, oh, that's kind of romantic, but depending on, but back then it was just like you walk into a studio and the engineer would just look at you like, why the hell is your gear making any kind of noise whatsoever? And you're thinking, because there's a lot of electricity and parts and things and antennas. What do you mean?
Which is why Lukather used EMGs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but that, that slowly went away. So it had those pickups and a mid boost, and it had a Floyd, and then the Puffy. Luke talks about it.
Does he still have that?
No, he says he's sad that he let that one get away, but a Japanese guy just offered it. He couldn't believe what the guy wanted to pay for it, so he was just like, I had to go for it.
Money talks sometimes, yeah.
Because it got weird. Everybody was very territorial back then, and I with my products at Line 6 and KRK, I could get kind of territorial as well. But I realized, you know what? So many people are doing such great work. The stuff you're doing, Dave, with your guitars, incredible. Tom's doing great work. John is doing great work. Roger Sadowski, I've loved that guy. He's just a dear friend, and everybody's doing cool work. It's like football teams, and there's definitely stuff where you can go, no, that actually sounds bad. But in general,
I've always said this, even with amps and guitars or whatever, everyone does their recipe of what they want to see. And then the end user really is going to decide what they want to buy. And maybe they're going to buy all of them.
Well, yeah,
for the different flavors. And, so I never looked at it as like some competition or something or anything, especially the amps. I was like, well, I make my sound, and Soldano makes his sound, and Egnator made his sound, and VHT Fryat made his sound. And it's up to you to decide which one you want, or maybe you want them all.
Yeah.
Right.
They're all
That's
good
what makes
products.
it fun.
Yeah.
It makes it exciting to have different visions on, different instruments or different amps and so forth. So, by the way, we've got Justin Bryant from Two Notes.
Yes, Dan.
You guys rock. Hey,
no,
Rich.
Basswood
hey, Dave,
does not sound awesome. I agree with Rich. It's Asswood.
Didn't Eddie like Basswood though? Didn't he?
Well, his original guitar wasn't
Van Halen.
Basswood.
Not originally, but he started
Later
using later on.
Yeah.
And Justin sent us a super chat. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So let's tell the story. You tell the story, Rich. How did you hook up with James Tyler and then from there go to Line 6?
So
where did you go? So you went from Tyler to Fernandez.
Yeah.
Right?
So I moved out here. I was going to Dick Grove and put up that place for bass. I was going to Dick Grove and Dave remembers this. There was a magazine in town called BAM. It was Bay Area Music originally, but came down here and they just kept calling it BAM. It's no.
Did I shut it down?
Oh, maybe.
All right, I'll reopen it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to Grove and I'm looking at BAM magazine in the lounge and I'm like, oh, the place for bass. And then I looked at all the bass players. I know who all of them are now, but I was a young doofy kid. the reason I ended up in that band with Karlstrom was because I owned a bass. I had played French horn in high school, but I could play, I think, Owner of a Lonely Heart riff, dung, 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 and I knew You Dropped a Bomb on Me. Yeah, that's it. So you know, and some of those guys are now even friends, you know, like Steubenhouse and stuff, Jason. But so I saw this ad and I'm like, well, crap, that's just right over here. I'm going to drive over there and check this place out. So I went in and he had all of this stuff, Kubicki Factors and the Ken Smith and the Tobiases. And I'm like walking down and I'm looking, he's got all this stuff. And I come and there's this bass and it's got this just horrific headstock. And I was like, ugh, who's that? Who made that? And Jim goes, that's me. So anybody out there who's like, what's with the headstock? Just trust me. I was there with you, you know, and then stuck my foot.
I love the headstock.
Yeah. So, and a lot of guys do, but definitely at first it was a good 95.
It's grown on me.
Yeah.
It's grown on me.
Yeah. Well, it's like anything, right? There's some really crazy looking cars that at first when I saw the design, I was just like, that's as goofy. And then when you see them kind of around a track and what they can do, you all of a sudden you're like, oh, But so so I bought a Kubicki Factor from him. Fun story there is it was a pink one. It was kind of Pepto-Bismol pink. And I took it to Grove and got just made fun of relentlessly. And then I came in the next week and I said, well, Billy Sheehan's bass is this color. And so they called me Pepto Sheehan for the rest of the semester.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so I bought that from Jim. He set up some stuff for me. I ended up buying like a 5-string modulus that we eventually put a Tyler preamp in. But one day he was on Lancashire at the time. Where was Making Music?
Well, it was on Lancashire somewhere, yeah, but I mean, wasn't Tyler like near where Andy Brower was originally on Lancashire?
Bring up the Jake E. Lee picture.
Okay.
Oh boy, so, I just saw Jake.
Yeah, so it's to Andy and Jim. So I don't have a lot of that history. Jim doesn't talk about it a lot, but for a while, Andy and Jim had shops next to each other, and they worked together in the sense of Jim would work on guitars, Andy would work on, you know, gear and getting it to them or whatever. And I don't remember if that was on. I think that might have been the Lancashire shop.
It must have been the Lancashire. That was before me, so that must have been in the early.
For me too. My whole career, the only thing I ever knew of Andy was we had a ladder that said Tyler Brower, you know, that I always had, you know, used to get stuff down in the garage. We'll show the garage picture in a second. But and then we got a Christmas card one year of Andy in front of his Porsche in his big house, said Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
I always thought that was funny. It was like, that's a Christmas card? Okay. But yeah. So they go way back, you know, Jim, and this is just me recollecting a story again. So nobody write it down in history, but Jim and him were having dinner and Andy was just like, gosh, what do I do in life? And what do you love, Andy? And he's like, man, I love getting tone and I love, you know, getting stuff together and putting things together that make cool sounds. And Jim's like, well, why don't you just do that for people? You know, it's like, so they had that shop next to each other. And I don't know much after that. And I know like Making Music was up the street. So anyway, he lost that lease or whatever and moved over to Vineland, actually right next to Track Record, which at that point, Track Record had moved from Hollywood over to Vineland.
I remember that shop.
Yeah. And
so this must have been late 80s then.
Yeah, very late 80s. And so I would go there, and then I ended up starting to set up all the guitars for any of the bands that were at Track Record with Karlstrom, like the River Dogs. That's where I met Vivian.
Yep.
And I set up I set up that blue, is it a BC Rich or a Jackson, the blue one from the White Snake video, that little super thing. I set that up. And there was a note the next day, here's 9 more guitars. Do what you did to that one. And then I talked to him on the phone and he's like, Rich, my guitar has never played this good before. And I was like, really? Because you've already been in Dio and all this stuff. So what I learned from Jim, you know, and took to setting up guitars, I ended up doing that. I did Alice in Chains Dirt. I was the guy on that. Orange 9mm. I set up all those guitars, which was a band that had Chris, oh my gosh, just one of my best buds. He's in Bush now. I'm mind cramping.
Oh, Chris,
Trainer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was in Helmet as well. And Brian almost worked with Helmet. But so anyway, so he was on Vineland, and I walked into his shop one day, and he was sitting there. And I was like, "What's up?" And he goes, I just can't seem to find people to work for me. And I'm like, "I'll work for you." And so I started working for him, and it was a little bitty shop, and I started learning to do fret work and this and that. And then something went weird with the landlord, and Jim was tired of doing repairs. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to just start building guitars only." And so, yeah, we moved to his garage.
I remember that era too.
Yeah. So that guitar that in the upper left there, that ended up going to Bill Champlin in Chicago, and was in a couple of videos. And it was the era when Dwayne Bailey was in there, and what a great guitar player. But that was the guitars sort of being put together. And then over on the right, that's guitars at the top that are like base coated or whatever, and the bottom ones are for color. And that's Jim shooting a guitar in his backyard when he was about 36, 37 years old. And this bench that is in the middle on the right, that's a guy named Robert Nino, who used to work for him, but he would come and do repairs. That bench is Jim's bench, and it's still his bench in our current shop, if anybody ever comes by. And then that was just a Fiat he gave me that was souped up. Jim's a car guy. He's a car guy and a photographer. That's what he wanted to do in life. And he every few days he'll go, "I just never set out to do this. I didn't want to work on guitars. I didn't want to build guitars.
Yeah.
To take pictures and drive fast cars, So that's how I started working for him. So I worked into the garage, and we did those first bunch. And then I moved back to the Midwest for a minute. I was in this band, and we thought we could go back there and do the whole top 40 thing. Dave, like in the 80s, you could be in a top 40 band and then do a few originals and build a following, and then switch to all originals and hopefully build a local following, and like Head East, bands like that would do. And but this is right before everything, went to crap in the music industry, but we didn't see it at that time. And I did get to do 3 gigs with Bobby Kimball from Toto. So that was kind of a cool thing, being a 25-year-old guy who loved frickin' Toto. And he was, he sang his butt off. I know there's stuff now, and it's, people get older, but we did Hold the Line first, and it was over. We go, "Man, you sound just like the record." 'Cause that was like a Midwestern thing to say about a cover band. "Man, you guys are just like the record." So anyway, I moved back. It was 37 below one morning, and my wife is like, "Screw this, let's go back to California." And even my little kids, who were like 2 and 3, were like, "Yeah, go back to California where it's warm." So I came back and almost immediately started working for him again on Sepulveda. And he did a short-lived thing with Schecter, and he's way forgotten what all that was about. But for a minute, like Dan Huff was playing a Tyler built Schecter, and that's when I would take guitars down and see Robert from Stone Temple Pilots at when he worked at Sunset Custom and Lab Sound and with Sean Tubbs and stuff. And so we then moved just across the way in that same complex, and that complex over on Sepulveda behind Fatburger was where Schecter was when it was Dave Schecter, when it was they built parts and bodies and necks and stuff. And Pat Wilkins worked there, who's a killer builder and painter in town. And Tom Anderson was the neck and body guy. So when they moved to Texas, that's when Tom's ventured off on his own. And that's actually, I think, where Jim first met Tom, was when he was still at Schecter. And so we moved in there. So it's fun. So there's like this little history, tie in, and we just kept blowing out a wall and just kept expanding the shop until 94, when I left to go to Fernandez. And, I don't even remember. Like Dave said, I wasn't fired. I kind of left. I think it was money. It's just, we were
got a better job.
Yeah. Job, not a better place. It was man, I met so many guys that are still good friends now, like Scott Uchida and Rob Timmons, Arcane Pickups. You know, he was my shop manager.
Yeah.
He's the one who actually hired me. He called me he's like, hey man, I'm looking for a gig. I can't remember if I knew him or if he called cold, but we got to know each other then. It was like, yeah, we're not hiring right now, but I'll keep you in mind. Well, then he called me when I was just doing repairs for Jim. I was trying to do the repairs to take that pressure off of him so he could just concentrate on building. And I was, for a minute, I was like, I forget what I called myself, the guitar specialist or something. I was going to try and be a drum doctor type of thing, you know, go to the studios, set up all the guitars, not be the tech, but just kind of prep stuff. Then Rob calls me, he goes, hey man, we're looking for a setup guy, and it paid okay. You know, I mean, I think back now and I'm just like, really, that's all it took to get me. But I set up guitars and we lost our accounts payable person. Well, Jim, I had been helping him with the office stuff and helping him get his taxes together and whatnot. And, so I was also a numbers guy. I loved math. I thought I was going to be a math teacher, you know, so I would help Jim with all that stuff and ordering and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, hey, I used to do that for Jim. I'd love to do that. So I became accounts payable and then later accounts receivable and payroll and human resources. And I kept all the Macs going in the office and all this kind of stuff. And thankfully I did that job, because that leads to what you were talking about, Mark. How did I end up at line 6? Well, Fernandez couldn't afford me anymore, so they laid me off. I even trained the person that took over for me, and I was happy.
Now, hang on one second. Fernandez was located in California, or they're
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
they were Japanese.
Yeah, Fernandez USA.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for people that don't know, it's I don't think they have the dominance they had back then, but back then they were 60% of the Asian market. They were Fender in Japan, in Asia. You know, they're just massive. They had bands like X, Hide, just all these massive artists, X Japan and all that stuff. And then we worked with, and man, because of the Sustainer, thankfully, you know, instead of just being another guitar company, I ended up meeting. That's when I met Adrian Ballou and Matt Scannell from Vertical Horizon, who's still super close friend, and he actually got the Tyler after I left Tyler's and all these people. So I got to meet a lot of folks, you know, because we had the Sustainer. The Edge played, you know, a full-on Fernandez for a while, and Billy Corgan had one, and that original blue BJ guitar that Green Day guy has, that original one with the stickers and stuff, that's a Fernandez. His mom bought him when it used to be a Strat headstock. So
they were great. They were great guitars. I mean, even the Strat clones and stuff that were coming out of there were fantastic. Because weren't they made by Fujigen?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, which is great guitars.
I know they had early versions of the Floyd.
Yeah. Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
So
you worked at Fernandez for a bunch of time. Yeah.
So then they laid me off, and I was 10 years. That's a lot of years nowadays to be at a place, and you just start getting restless. So I was happy. I was like, I'm going to collect some unemployment, and I'm going to I had already been doing some records and doing some Weekend Warrior stuff with Hartree. And so we got into it, and we did a bunch of cool stuff for about a year. And we normally would grab Chris Pooley, but at one point he wasn't available, and we were doing this record for a girl, Kylie Hughes, who was her dad owned Public Storage, and so she had a decent budget. So we were hiring these killer players, and we couldn't get Chris. So I had just met a guy who everybody said was a killer keyboard player named Daryl Smith, and he played on the record. And then I said, hey man, I do this church gig out in Malibu, and we play like at 105 decibels, and we have a Leslie and a Hammond already there on stage. You want to come and jam? Like the drummer played with Eric Johnson and Billy White and Ian Moore. He's the drummer on that first Ian Moore record. Mike Villegas, he was the drummer, and just a killer band. And he's like, yeah, man, sure. And so he comes out and he sees me with a jazz bass into a rack compressor, the RNC, the really nice compressor, a little half rack job, into vintage Tube Screamer. What else was on my board? Oh, Octaver, EBS, and then into a Qtron into a Sans amp into a 73 SVT at a church. And with distortion, I would go to what I called, DEFCON 1, everything on.
Yeah.
And so he was like, they were working on, and I didn't know this, but at the time they were working on the low down bass amps at line 6. So after the set, he was like, do you need a job? And I'm like, no, not really. And he goes, man, I just, you use effects and it's like, we're hiring a product manager. And I'm like, I didn't even know what a product manager was. And I said, man, I'm think I'm going to keep doing this music thing. And he's like, well, it pays this much. And I'm like, maybe I should look at that. And not because I needed money, but I just thought that's a salary that tells me that's a fun job. That's a job they're looking for, a guy. And so I started kind of getting excited about it. And he writes to me and he says, hey, Rich, I think you're the right guy for the product. Perfect, I think. But do you have any financial experience? This is before he knew my resume. I said, well, I was the controller at Fernandez. He goes, oh, perfect. So I went in there and I interviewed. It was nerve-wracking. I didn't know Marcus Ryle and his legend at the time. I knew he was one of the founders of Line 6. I had a Beam. It was fun to record at home into a old Korg D8 digital recorder and dink around, and a pod was great. I didn't have to bother the neighbors, but that's about all I knew about Line 6. And in fact, I tried the bass pod and didn't like it. I found out years later why. And so they hired me to do low down bass amp. Then it went to Spider 3 with all the artist presets. And when I heard Spider 2 and they said, what we're going to do is just put artist presets in it, I said, well, can we fix how it sounds? And they go, we're not going to spend any money remodeling, but if you can work with sound design and make it sound better, I said, I think I can. So I went and I saw the tools that we use for shaping. I couldn't remodel, but I could shape some stuff. And I got Scannell and Tim Pierce and Bobby and a couple other guys. And I let them play. And, like on those Spider amps, the clean was always fun, especially with effects. And then the insane was just way more gain than you could ever make a record with. But it was just super fun for a kid. But the mid gain stuff was like, this is
that was the bad part. Yeah.
Oh, horrible. So I got it to a place where I was over at Tim's and he said, Rich, I got to tell you, I could probably I could probably mic that up right now and record, because you really made the mid gain stuff sound way more authentic. It wasn't just me. It was me and Jeff Slingloff, who's now at Boss and doing all that.
Jeff. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, he just killed it. And that was me at Line 6. People ask anybody. I was the guy who I would get like that dog and I'd be like, I'm not letting go, So we did Spider 3 with all the artist presets. And then that's when we did the partnership with Reinhold Bogner. And my short list personally was Stevie Fryette, because he already had it. We wanted to put our modeling on the front end of an amp. And I was just like, well, let's just do that, if he's interested. Mm-hmm. And the reason we went with Reinhold is because when they modeled the Uberschall, and this is the story they told me, because we kind of only really reached out to Reinhold because Daryl knew him really well. And of course, I met him on the Alice in Chains Dirt when he brought down the Fish, and that ended up being a big part of Dirt. And then just over the years, I just stayed in touch with him because he's just one of my favorite crazy guys ever. And so when they did the Uberschall before me, he didn't call up mad. He didn't send cease and desist. He said, hey, I heard you're modeling my Uberschall. Can I send you my favorite? Can you model that one? And then when you have it ready, can I come and help tweak it? So he got the fact that thousands of kids were going to see this name Uberschall Bogner, mm-hmm. And be like, well, I wonder what the real one is like, And there's a famous pedal company that'll go unnamed, and he was furious. But when I talked to him later, I became good friends with him. I said, come on, man. When Line 6 put that pedal in their stuff, I think it wasn't in the DL4. It was a weird effect. I said, did you see a sales spike? He kind of was like, you know, like you didn't want to say, yeah, you know. So anyway, I did that, and those 2 amps, the Spider 3 and then the Spider Valve with Bogner, we had 2 amps under 500. They were $499, and the X3 had just come out. That gave us Line 6's first $100 million year, and we became 51% of the under 500 market for a little bit, quite a while. And then of course everybody went, we better do this. And there was the, you know, the Mustang, and I think Marshall did something, and, you know, everybody started going, we better, you know, get in this game. And, you know, so we did that. And then here comes, wow, this Bogner thing worked great. How can we revive the Variax? Because when I was talking to guys, like I constantly talked to customers, I was like, when I was at Fernandez, they came over to see how to set up a guitar, because we had a whole setup shop. They were trying to see what it would take for Line 6 to go into guitars. And they knew that bringing them over, you have to tweak them, put them back in the box and send them out. So they came over, and when that guitar came out of the bag, we all had to be under NDA at that point. It came out of the bag, and I thought, oh my gosh, we only had to make people get past a headstock at Tyler. How are you going to get people past the whole guitar? It was just like this. So they did, and then of course they did improvements. You know, the one that kind of had a Paul Reed Smith vibe to it was really cool, and they refined it, you know, over the years. But the no pickups thing, when I said, hey, let's revamp Variax, I mean, Daryl Smith, whenever I talk about what I did at Line 6, it's really me and this guy Daryl Smith, who has since gone on to, he works with TED Talks and does audio visual stuff for like massive venues and all kinds of stuff. And so him and I, we were like, hey, we told Line 6, first off, it's got to be a great guitar. So when the electronics stop working because it's outdated or whatever, you still have a guitar that you could just put volume pots in and still rock a guitar. So it has to have pickups. And they said, yeah, but with no pickups, it really tells people that it's, and I go, yeah, but it's a hot chick with no eyebrows. You know, you go to the store, you know, and it's early morning, and a mom has to grab their kids some milk, and she doesn't have time to draw, you know, those women that shave their eyebrows, and they, you know, and they're really cute, but they're like, you're like, something isn't right, you know? So, and it's also its own backup. You're playing, you're doing middle of Skinner, and the guts die or the battery dies or whatever. Boom, you're on electric pickups. You can finish the gig. You don't have that fear. So, and I just knew that if we let a guitar builder do what Bogner did for the tube side of stuff, I just knew it would be huge. So I talked to Anderson and Sadowski, and I talked to Jim and a bunch of people, and I ultimately knew that Jim was going to push Line 6 the hardest. So we did the James Tyler Variax. It's still selling today, which is crazy for a technology product to still be going 12 years later. And I left Line 6 on purpose to start mixing records, and I moved in with Karlstrom. And I'll just give you the rest of my little story. And I was there, and it was going great. We would get people to spend most of their money recording it well, and I would mix in the box. If the budget was this big, you know, we'd spend the mother load recording it well, because if you capture great sounds, the mix almost happens on its own. Yep. And it was going great. And then he sadly had a heart attack and passed away, you know, at 51 years old, and in 2012. And he was like my best bud out here, you know. So it was crazy. And we had the SSL and all the outboard gear and all. So we knew it was going to be hard to keep it going without a name like his. So I saw the writing on the wall, moved to this place, my studio, and I was just mixing, and I was looking for a part-time gig, and KRK fell in my lap. They were looking for a product manager, and I didn't want a full-time gig, but I thought, well, let me just go see what it's about. And I went in jeans and a t-shirt just like this, because I was like, they either want what I do or they don't. I'm not going to wear a suit and act all corporate. I'm going to go in and tell them what I think. And I said, first off, I didn't even know KRK was still around. And they looked at me like I was crazy, because they sold the crap out of those rockets. I had never seen a rocket. I don't even know how that's possible now, because all I see is rockets everywhere. But I knew that there used to be guys using, you know, the E series and the V series, like Joe Barresi. Still one of his main mixed speaker with all his speakers, the guy who did Tool and Queens of the Stone Age, for those of you that don't know. is still a pair of V6s, you know. So he was on my team to redo the V series, and Pensado's using them now, and just, you know, Mark crap down at East West. I'm mind cramping. Anyway, it was a blast, and I did that for 5 years, and then Gibson went. If anybody, there's certain things I can talk about. The Gibson bankruptcy was crazy. The people running it now, I got to tell you, they're awesome. It's hard to step into any place and you're going to have detractors, but JC cares, you know, and that team is a good team. And they kind of fixed Gibson, and then they started looking at Pro Audio. I was working for Pro Audio, so we were Serwin Vega and Stanton as well. So they sold those brands and moved Caracade to Nashville. I got 5 grandkids here. So boom. And then I'm talking to Two Notes. I'm talking to some other companies about my next moves. And I'm also ramping up my mixing. And right before COVID, I got a gig doing Disney and Marvel special features. I had to go through police background checks to even walk in the building. And I got the gig, and it was supposed to start. And another friend who works at Disney, a killer guitar player named Brian Kahanik, he works in the union. And so he's like, I know the path. I'll get you doing this, and I'll get you doing. I'm like, I guess I'm mixing. And then COVID. Right. And then I'm in COVID, and I get a text. I'm actually ended up getting really busy. I mixed a big church in Houston because everybody was broadcasting. So they would record, and then I'd mix it, and they'd broadcast on Sunday. So I was doing okay. And then Jim said, hey, some of my people were scared, and, you know, I'm down a bunch of people. Can you just come help me, you know, shield and wire a few pick guards? And so I went back down, and because I've stayed obviously friends with Jim over the years, and I'm helping him out, and he wanted to he had announced his retirement. And I said, what do you want to do? And he's like, I go, if you move on, Tyler will live on, you know, but will people still be into it? I said, but what if the guy who was there with you in your garage, you know, and did the James Tyler Variax with you came back, and we do this thing together? Could it be a thing where you semi-retire and you do stuff like get the set neck going and the basses going? There's all these things he's wanted to do that he never had time for. And he said, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. And I said, well, let me help you build a team. So we found a guy from a pickup guy who worked at Exotic. We grabbed him, and then one of my dealers knew a guy named Andy Hicks who was at Exotic at the time, and they also had layoffs because of COVID.
That was the guy, Dave, that I told you about, that I met at NAMM, who worked for Exotic, who was a builder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He had worked for Fender, specifically Jackson and Gretsch. So electric guitars, hollow body, real skilled guy. And I could tell that he would understand to do it the Tyler way. And then, and Jim's great. Jim will go, look, you can have ideas, but learn my way. Then give me your ideas. And
that's the important thing. It's the reason anyone's guitar is anyone's guitar, like be it a Tom Anderson, a Don Grosh, a Jim Tyler, is because they have a way of doing things, and their way is what has made that guitar special. Because in reality, when you look at any guitar, it's a piece of maple in the neck, and it's a piece of alder there, shaped in whatever shape it is. It's the same.
Yep.
There's no magic there. The magic is in the final setup, assembly, and little details of way it's done.
Yep, exactly.
You know, how rolled the edges of the neck are, how polished the ends of the frets are, how beautifully polished the frets are. You know, like all this stuff. I mean, 'cause you can take a cheap guitar, and do all this stuff, and with the same hardware, it's just as good as the expensive guitar. Of course, there's a lot of time now put into it, so now it is an expensive guitar. But it's the recipe.
Yeah,
it's the recipe.
Exactly. So he's been great. So he kind of took over the stuff that Jim was doing. He's doing the final setups, and he does all the neck work, and then he just helps me run the shop. I'm general managing, and then he runs the shop. And we hired a couple more killer cats, and there's a guy there named Tucker who's been there for like 11 years. He's our paint guy. Is just we actually just named a finish after him. we were working on a finish, and it wasn't going where Jim wanted. And Tucker goes, I got an idea. And he finished it off, and it looked super cool. It's like purple and blue. It's one of those schmear finishes, and we called it berry. But I increased production at the beginning of the year 33% over what Jim had ever done. And with this team, are able to, cruise along. And it, Dave, challenges. Jim was asking me actually how it was going, with the fire and everything. And I was filling him in a little bit, but there's always challenges, and I can't even imagine going through something like the freaking place burning.
Well, like I say, luckily it wasn't just my company that I had to deal with this. It was the parent company that makes our products, Boutique Amps Distribution, and I got to hand it to Avi for not having a heart attack during the whole thing, because oh my God, it's just like you have this happen and you have all this smoke damage, and then you're just throwing out. You're literally throwing out rolls of Tolex and cabinet after cabinet and product after product, throwing it out because you can't use it. Yeah. And it's not that we were fire damaged, it was smoke damage, because our part of the building wasn't burned, it was just like one end, it burned through a wall. So there was a little bit of water damage and stuff at that end, but there wasn't that much stuff there. But then you got to move. Yeah. So you got to move, not a small shop. You got to move a 53,000 square foot building that has been there for 15 years, full of junk. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the junk, when we sized down, at one point in time, it was 80,000 square feet, but they kind of sized down to 50 because the landlord had raised the rate. And they threw away a lot of junk then. Mm-hmm. And now this move has forced them to throw away even more stuff that was, it's just like buried in the corner, that you forget about over time. Yeah. And
that's what Jim's fearing right now. We're on a 6-month lease. Our building got sold, and the new landlord's great. And so he's basically, we re-up each month. So at some point he might go, I need the whole building. And I'm just like, and we only have 8,000 square feet.
Well, I got to tell you, the other huge problem in Los Angeles now is real estate is just through the damn roof.
It's crazy.
I mean, rental real estate, commercial real estate. I'm sorry, it's just gone out of control, completely out of control. I don't even. I mean, it's funny. You would have thought some of it would have come down with COVID a little bit,
right?
In actuality, during the last year, it's gone up.
Yeah.
I randomly look at commercial real estate from time to time, and I'm like, I can't believe how much money they're getting for this.
Yeah.
It's like, you go to another state, I know someone that's in, Oregon or whatever, and he got a 10,000 square foot building and he pays $700 a month or something.
Unreal.
So
what we're up against in our industry is we could go there, but are we going to find the guys that know how to do what we do?
Well, yeah, that's a huge problem, especially guitars, Yeah. Workforce. Will you have the workforce to do it?
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Our rent went up, and I've been looking around, and what's funny is, Jim, even when the building went up for sale, we were like, oh, maybe we should just nab it. Then it's an investment. We could rent out the other 6 units. It's like an 8-unit place. And I looked at the price and I was like, no. Wow. Yeah. Cause he had a recollection of it being like 1/5 of what it ended up going for.
Yeah. I went for probably over a couple million.
It was 5 or 6.
Yeah. Okay. Way over.
And we know about costing, and you know what that line means in your rundown of your profit and loss. And it's like, it's brutal, so that's another reason.
When all you guys wonder about why things cost certain things, this is a factor in it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's believe me.
Overhead, employees, salaries.
But then people will go like what you just said. Well, why don't you just move out of California, go somewhere else? But like you said, finding the skilled workers, finding people to be able to do it is a challenge.
And our people are here.
Exactly. And, people don't always think about it. It's like they look at a product as in, okay, here's the cost of materials and here's the cost in labor to make it. Okay. Oh, that's the cost of it. No, that's not the cost of it. No. Factor in overhead, all your insurances. Factor in your say you have an accountant. Say you have a product, not product manager, but say you have a production manager.
Mm-hmm.
So a production manager is not a cheap figure. An accountant is not a cheap figure. Say you have a marketing guy that does marketing or does web-based stuff and all this stuff. So say you have, say you have 3 or 4 people that are over 100,000 salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Plus your overhead in a year. Add that all up and then like divide that by the number of product you go out and then see how much more that tax onto it. Yeah. Then you ship it to a dealer. So you have to make some money there because that's the point of the whole thing is to actually make some money, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then the dealer marks it up from there.
Yep.
Another set of percentage points. So it's not something that's coming from China that costs $200. If you look at a Chinese business model or something like of making, say you're making cheap amps or something. If you look at a Chinese business model, you spec the stuff, you design the stuff, you send it off, it gets made, it comes to a warehouse and gets stored, and then it gets shipped out.
Mm-hmm.
So how many employees do you need?
Yeah.
You might be able to run it all on like 4 people.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Like,
you need someone in the office that can do multiple things and stuff. And like, you can just shuffle paper basically.
Yeah. I mean, I have as many employees as we had at Fernandez USA, and we were shipping out 30, 40 guitars a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I do 8 a week because it's a totally different thing because, they come in. And I got to tell you a funny story. You brought up China. When I was, cruising around trying to pick a factory, and we ultimately landed on World that does like the Paul Reed Smith SE series and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I never thought, and I still believe, they have one that's a more affordable one, but I never thought that a Variax, that what it does was for the kid to get for Christmas his first guitar that's going to end up under a bed. I always thought it was going to be a guy that's at least a certain level where he's gigging, he's doing top 40, he's playing at a church, whatever, and then we had the American made one for garbage and guys like that get what it does and they do crazy stuff with it, or like 10-12 foot ninja guy who's a good friend. I loved what he did with the Shuriken. But I was in China though. We looked, I went to Yako, which was a place that did a lot of the Fernandez stuff, the Chinese made stuff, and they did a great job. But I went to a place and I just remember seeing a room that was, I don't know, it had to have been at least 4,000 square feet. And all it was is this conveyor of black strap bodies, and then go down a row, and it would go back and forth and go down a row and back and forth, just hundreds of them. And that was like a day. And I just thought, how come in life we don't go over to a friend's house and have to walk over guitars to get anywhere? There should be guitars everywhere, but I don't know. We just must hide them perfectly because you just never see them. Well, Mark's got his all up.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dave,
actually,
all I have is, I don't know if anybody knows what those are behind me. It's obviously an engine, but there was a campaign that before I got to Line 6 for the pod where there was 4 channels: clean, crunch, insane, and drive. So these were drive, and it's a guitar. There's the headstock, and Clean was a Electrolux vacuum cleaner, pretty fun. And then Crunch was a bug, like, you step on a bug. Right. And then Insane was a rusty razor blade. But anyway, I'm a car guy, so these were just in offices. So I grabbed the first one, and then when I moved into artist relations over at Line 6 for about a year, I had that other one and I had them up. And so when I moved in here and left Line 6, I went, oh, this is perfect.
So, it looks cool. It looks cool. By the way, I
think we have some super chats, Mark.
Yeah,
we do. Solar Warden wanted to know, since you worked at Line 6, do you know how many actual Mustaine Line 6 prototype amps were ever made?
Only a couple. That the guys who did that hard work, they did an amazing job. And this is before we taught Line 6 that we could sell, $4,000, $5,000 JTVs. Those did pretty well. I think they've even made some recently, a few. The guy who did all the American-made JTVs was a guy named Tim Wilson, who worked with Grover for years, Jackson. And you guys know Grover, right?
I think so, yeah.
So Tim did that. I think he's still done some recently, but that Friedman, I mean, the Dave Mustaine amp looked super cool, and he started using it. He did a video, got like 250,000 views almost immediately, but they couldn't wrap their head around a boutique, and by that I just mean high-end thing, because what they were doing, they did with their engineer, and they figured out how to mold two sounds together. Like they modeled two sounds and stacked them, kind of like he was trying to achieve that thing that you do in the studio where you stack different amps just on the fly right there, and it sounded pretty great. And we were like, let's just chart it. They can be this much, people will buy them, but what it's going to do is halo over everything we do. The same thing happened with Helix, by the way. If there's any Helix fans out there, when I came to Line 6 in 2005, they had already had quite a few meetings, which they had codenamed this product Formula One. And I didn't even know why. I just thought it sounded cool because I'm a car guy, right? Well, years later, it didn't even dawn on me when I used the same analogy at KRK when Gibson was acquired by KKR Investments, who owned GoDaddy and the UFC and what else? Sonos, all these, they acquired us. So now we're in meetings with people that I know are not going to understand why I want to do the Expose line again, the high-end KRKs, which are like $3,000 a piece, 3,500, 4,000 a piece. They couldn't wrap their head around it. I knew that they wouldn't get it. So I showed a Honda Formula One car and a Civic, and I explained they lose money even making this car, and we're not going to lose money, but we're not going to make a lot of money doing this high-end KRK, but everything Honda learns in the suspension and all that ends up in a Civic, and you end up with happier customers. Plus you have a guy in a Civic thinking he's in the Formula One car. So, and then later somebody goes, well, dude, that's why we called that project Formula One, and the idea was to put as much DSP and as much power as they had to. And this is probably right around the time Cliff was getting started, maybe with Fractal, maybe. This is just my recollection. And Cliff became a good friend. Not a close friend, but we talked because, we both had to battle the boards and crazy people on the forums and stuff. And he would take it to heart and actually cause health problems. And I would always call him and be like, dude, you just let it roll off, and don't take everything too seriously or whatnot. But anyway, so we did the Pod HD 500, and of course our floor pod, the floor models we were always being chased by the other big companies, and we were always number one, but we were losing the mindshare game to Cliff and Fractal and then Kemper. So we got into a meeting, and Steve DeFuria, head of product development, said, okay, let's not forget budget. Let's pretend this thing might even end up being $14,000 or whatever. Let's not even think about that. What do we want? What would be a unit that could work for a guy? And we started talking about it, and we came up with this thing. that we didn't even know what we could call it, because we kind of already knew we didn't want to call it pod, but it was a $1,500 pod though. And we took it to sales and marketing and leadership staff. We would do these meetings where we would pitch products to them. Ultimately, it was our decision, and they almost always would go with what product development. It was our asses. Like if a product went out there and it didn't sell, the sales guy didn't get in a lot of trouble. We did. And some companies aren't like that. Product development just pushes stuff at sales, and then they're screwed, and they're getting yelled at. But no, we would. So we showed them this thing, and they were like, $1,500 pod, you guys are crazy. And we explained the whole Formula One thing, about how it'll drive the sales of the HD500. Well, when it launched, it just blew up. And now they didn't ever do an update to the HD500. And now they came out with Pod Go that's based on Helix and stuff. So fun story. I don't know if anybody was
that's
that
cool. Good stuff.
But Formula One, yeah, cars.
L. Scott Music. Is there a room in the guitar world for an old guy to make modest living doing custom guitars in his home shop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I see guys every year at NAMM show, and I think it's a long road, and I'm sure Dave feels the same. It's a hard road. The thing that was great about the guitar builders we know is, and this is why another reason it's hard to move from Southern California or a place with a lot of music, is this is where we meet the guys that help us make great products. This is where the artists live or come to, that don't live here. They ultimately will be in Los Angeles, but why not? If you build
don't count on it being your sole income though. No. And my suggestion is, if you do something like that, it's
do it for the love of it.
It's a little sideline to make a little extra money, and then you see where it goes, and at some point, if it builds, it becomes more, and maybe you can, but tough road.
It is. It's hard.
Yeah.
I always say that I want to design. I want to, I want to get into making my own amps and stuff. I'm like going, okay, well, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a local friend here, Mark Funk, who does his own guitars, builds bodies and necks from scratch, and does his own thing. But it's not his full-time gig, Yeah. But he builds great stuff. Ed Pittman, thanks for the super chat. I think this is your comment here. Tyler have the most wonderful necks. Loving the show, guys. Thanks.
Cool.
Appreciate it. And then Rummy, thanks for the super chat. Thanks to Mark for the small box 50 recommendation. Reminds me of my JCM 800, but with options that I could only wish with a Marshall had. The Plexi channel. Oh my.
Sweet.
Awesome. I'm glad that you got it. Perfect. We have some other super chats. Vipas Patil, how are you? Hey, folks, just joined. Can you please talk about the mid boost and how it's voiced? Any tips who this is suited for and who it isn't?
Sure. Well, it's
a mid boost.
Yeah. Actually, it's a really, really, really low mid boost, because it's actually down. The peak of it is really actually down near 100. But and let's see if I do this correctly. Yeah, is that right? So the low end, it pushes up those mids as well, and Demeter. It's a Demeter and to Jim's specs, and we've worked with Jim Demeter for years, and it's funny. I never really measured it before, but we built a guitar for Sean Tubbs, and he got it, and because you can completely bypass it, he's like, yeah, let's try it, and he got it. And when he first got it, you can go watch his video. He's very candid about it. He said, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. Then I started messing around, and I realized, if you don't use the mid boost, it's still that preamp. And when you kick in a preamp, the big thing that happens is it goes from high impedance to low impedance. So when a high impedance signal rounds off the top and the bottom, and then you kick in the preamp and it opens up the top and the bottom, and it can be really cool for clean and certain things. But where you get in trouble with is when Jim did that back in the 80s with the racks and everything. So when vintage amps started coming back in and the vintage sound, that mid boost opening up that low end and high end wasn't there when guys like Dave and were developing their sound that's in the amp. So they were
hi-fi.
Yeah, like me at line 6, the whole time I was there, I used my Fernandez P bass for testing everything. That's going to be the guitar. That's going to be the bass that almost everybody has. Or I knew that sound well enough that I designed the bass amp to cater to that. And then it could work with other stuff. So same thing, guitar builders, we're grabbing a Paul, we're grabbing a Strat, we're making sure that, and we're designing. So but the mid boost is still handy because you can use it like with a single coil at the neck. You can put your neck pickup and roll a little bit of mids into it and get more of a jazz sound out of it. You can just, especially with racks and getting that really high gainy thing, you can roll that up and it just gives you a push, and that kind of thing. So it has its place, and Jim used to not it was just a preset bypass. So your preamp was on all the time. And then eventually you realize that people need to be able to kick that preamp out.
Yeah,
so
true bypass.
Yeah, it becomes a flavor now that you can use with, and Jim builds all his own pickups now. And
it's a booster. It's a booster at a certain frequency. So it's like you had a clean boost on your pedal board and you were kicking it in. It's not and it has, like he said, a little bump in the low mid kind of area, and it's round, and there you go. I'm sure you probably even change that frequency easily.
Coming from line 6, I was talking to Jim about exactly that, and maybe talking to Jim Demeter about a way a guy could kind of select, maybe because there's some other key for, like, when I think mid boost as a mixer, like on guitar, I like when I'm mixing heavy guitars, I like to, roll the low end, high end off and give it a little 3K, just like, but
3K or 2K or somewhere in there.
Low mid is, for me, if I want to put a little ass in a guitar, like when I was running sound for Volto, some venues, I would put a little 500 on John's sound, just a little bit, So it would be cool if there's maybe 3.
A switch that has 3 choices of where where the point is on the cue.
And Dave knows this. It's like I know Dave has way more ideas come to him than come to me, but all these ideas come to us and they come to Jim, and and you just can't do them all.
Sure.
You have to stop what you're doing to, so.
Right. Focus. Tyler Britton. Or Britann, thanks for the super chat. Any fond memories of Jerry when you set up his guitars for the Dirt album?
Dave knows him way more than me. I met him 2-3 times over the years because I would come in when they were still sleeping, But I'm pretty sure that on Dirt, I don't remember. There might have been a Les Paul, but it was all those Music Mans. Music Man.
Or G&L?
G&L, sorry, G&L. Yeah, with all the crazy stuff painted on all of them. But I would set up the basses and the guitars, and I was around the sessions. I went down the first time I saw Jerry, he came walking through and he said something to Lane, and it sounded like he said something to the effect of, being a Midwest guy, I thought it sounded like, "Hey man, we got to slot the hogs," like just very matter of fact. And Lane was, quiet and soft spoken. But Karlstrom calls me up and he goes, "You got to come down here right now." And I'm like, okay. David just finished his mix on Rooster, and it was at El Dorado, and they have TAD speakers. It's those massive in the wall speakers. And this is unmastered too. Mm-hmm. He cranks it. Da-da, the quiet part. And I'm just like, oh my God. And then it goes through that first half of the chorus. And it hits, and I just peed a little.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Oh, because you've never heard anything like it. I mean, now it's like just lore. It's just part of our love of, but I almost felt like I forgot how to make music, and I forgot that I was a musician, and it felt like the first time I heard Van Halen or something, I was just like,
I have a similar kind of story, but not quite. It wasn't in the studio, unfortunately. But when I started working with Jerry again in recent times, the Black Gives Way to Blue record hadn't come out yet. and he had a copy of it. And he goes, "You guys want to hear it?" We sat in his Cadillac Escalade, and which had a great sound system, and he had it cranked up. And I remember hearing, I looking in view, I think we were listening to, and I remember hearing this snare and just this amazing mix, and I was just like floored how good it sounded. You know, that was
Toby Wright.
Who mixed it?
Yeah, who did that?
No, that's of course I can't remember right now. It's the guy who used to work with Bob Rock all the time.
Oh, crud.
You know,
Go on. Sorry,
we're old. We can't remember this.
Go ahead.
You're looking right now, aren't you,
Rich? And we'll answer this question.
Thank you. I'll think of it as soon as you find it.
Joshua Floyd, is it possible to make a BE and JBE switch on the JJ Junior foot switchable?
Yes, I do that all the time. I can do it. You add an extra master, so when you go to the JBE, you have control over the level. Yeah, can do that. Easy.
Ooh, wow, I may want to do that.
Here we go. Nick Rescalini.
No, he was the producer.
Oh, okay.
Mixer.
Mixer. Okay, let me go down. Nick is kick ass. I love that guy. Here we go. Personnel. Randy Staub.
Randy Staub, yeah.
Yeah.
Randy Staub did that record, and then he did the record after that.
Nice.
And then the one after that was Joe Barisi.
Joe. That's right. Yeah, the last.
They're
one.
very different sounding. The two mixers, very different sounding. Yeah. Personally, for Alice, I love Randy Staub.
Yeah.
Because he made it sound massive and huge, and just the snare and the drums and everything just was like crazy awesome sounding.
Yeah.
Joe made it a little more punk rock. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Joe.
See, I knew someone was going to say that. Cost because you live in California.
Well,
I mean, that adds to it, I'm sure.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, it adds to it in some of your taxes and how much your actual physical building costs.
Yeah, and a little bit your personnel, because the cost of living is a little
bit of your personnel, because your minimum wage is at least $15 and a little bit there. But still you're higher, but you still have the same issues. You still have insurances. You still have a production manager that's making over 100K. You still have, other high-end people. Marketing guys aren't cheap, things. You still have all sales guys, everything. All that comes into the part of the product, And
like you said, if you're going to move to some place that's going to be really cheap, good luck finding someone.
Well, yeah, the other thing is, if you, the funny thing I always say is, like, there's a point you come as a company, like you can do it out of your garage to a point.
Yeah.
And then you have to decide if you go bigger.
Yeah.
And if you go bigger, you might as well go much bigger.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you doubled or tripled the size of your company, you're making any more money than you were in the garage.
Correct. No,
because of the costs.
Yeah. Right. And it's you start to see a little more, but it's not, I know that Jim has done decent in his life, but he is not living high on the hog. I mean,
no one is doing this.
I remember one April Fool's. I did the worst. I stopped doing April Fool's jokes after this. I was really good at them, and I had fun doing them. But this one was so mean that I just stopped. We had 7 guitars. If I showed you guys that green book, it's fun to watch how many guitars. Like the early 90s, there might be like a page and a half, and now it's 380 guitars a year. Mm-hmm. Which we're as far as builds go, we're small, but we also just spend way more time on everything, and we're in demand, and I could build probably well, for sure. I can't even guess. Like it's always pressure for more guitars.
Mm.
But we had built 7 guitars for our Japanese distributor, and it was going to pay me. You know, I would have to sometimes wait weeks to get paid, but I loved Jim and we were friends, you know, and it was hard. And my wife was working at the time, and so we could hang in there and then get paid, you know. So Jim needed to get paid to pay his bills and me, and he comes in on April 1st, and I just said, "Hey man, yeah, T called and he just doesn't want the guitars." What? He sits down, which he never does. And he's like, what's going on? I go, I don't know. He just doesn't want to take the guitars. He said something about it being April 1st and he just doesn't want to deal with it. Does he ever want them? I don't know. I guess I should give him a call. I don't even know what we're going to do, you know? And he goes, well, I don't understand. I go, Jim, all I know is he kept saying something about April 1st. And then all of a sudden it hit him and he didn't laugh. His eyes got like this big and he said, don't you ever do that again. But that's where we were at then. It was like, you know, now if 1 or 2 guitars are running behind, you know, they're going to ship the next week, you know, or the week after that. There's a guy, you know, might be watching the cat in France waiting for his special like kickback guitar that has like all the bells and whistles and the old James Tyler pickups and even pearl buttons on the tuners and the whole shebang, named Arthur, who's a big fan. So, you know, what's old is new again. Yeah. But yeah, we don't have that anymore. I couldn't pull that April. He'd be like, oh, they don't? Okay, well, see if so-and-so wants to grab them.
Right,
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Casey McNerney, thanks for the super chat. I think this is your question. I've seen photos of EVH at line 6. Do you know what, if anything, might have developed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of NDAs involved, obviously. But I was telling Mark this story.
I remember that.
Yeah. He, I mean, I don't know him. I met Michael, you know, because Jim Tyler did so Michael and his wonderful, awesome tech. I'm mind cramping, Dave.
Matt?
No, Michael's the bass player.
Kevin Dugan?
Yes, Kevin and him and their tech at the time built that first Jack Daniels bass, just kind of carved it and got a thing on. It was going to be a one-off, you know, or a couple shows, and look at my Jack Daniels bass. And then when they went to, it was such a hit, they wanted to build full-on one. So that's my only. I met Michael once, and he was just super nice, so sweet. And but Eddie, he was working on something that ultimately we kind of use that technology to do a thing called Backtrack, which we didn't do many products that kind of came and went, but that was one of them. But it was a box about yay big, and you plugged your guitar in and then out to your amp, and it would, anytime you were playing, it would sense it and turn on and record and make a file automatically. So you could be at a rehearsal and just be jamming and then take it home and then be able to run it through a plug-in or whatever and go, oh, I like that. I like what we did on that. I'm going to make that a song or whatever. So you didn't have to think about it. And it wouldn't be just you turn on a recorder and it's going and there's air and all the talking and everything. So, but when he came in, a funny story, Marcus Rao was talking to him and it was like, where should I park? And it's like, anywhere you want. So we had this big square building out in Agora Hills. It was when we were in Agora Hills, and it was a square building, and there was a staircase and a sidewalk that went out to the parking lot about here. He came in and parked up on the sidewalk, right up to the stairs in his Mercedes, and just parked there. And this was when he had the long hair and his teeth were messed up before he got sober, and they were working on stuff and geeking out. And Dave knows this, I'm sure. You know, he's really a guitar geek, just like any of us. I mean, he just loved gear. It was fun to listen to him talk. And I was coming down the hall and he introduced himself to me just briefly. I just was leaving him alone. I had nothing to do with the project. So I just walked by him and he's like, hey, and I'm like, hey. And then he turns around and he goes, hey, I'm Eddie Van Halen. And I go, oh, nice to meet you. And he's sweet. But they asked him to sign this. We named everything in line 6 like Village Vanguard, or let's meet in the Roxy. It's, offices, and then all the stairwells and stuff. Like we had Stairway to Heaven in the back. And so we had this one that was something Van Halen. So we asked him to sign it, and he signed the wall instead, Misunderstood. And so we had his signature there. And then when we moved to Calabasas, they went to the janitor and said, hey, so just like let's cut out the drywall, and then we're going to frame it, and we'll bring it to the new building. And he totally misunderstood and cleaned the wall.
Oh,
but nothing ever came out of it. I think he still had a guitar that basically had like sort of a recorder built in, and we were trying to do some stuff, and he was nothing but cool,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So then whatever he was working on, that's what became that jam track thing. But
yeah, sort of the tech of it. It was nothing like what we were trying to do for him, but the tech was kind of cool. We thought that could make a cool little product. And there was one that had a mic as well, so same kind of thing where you could turn it on and leave it. And actually, my son used it for a while with his band. My son's in a band with a guy who was Finn on Adventure Time, and they're called Make Out Monday, and they've done a record with John Fields and toured like in Australia and the Philippines and stuff. So
cool.
I came here to do it, and he's doing it instead. But as all musicians now, he works at Amazon Fresh in North Hollywood. So if you want to go say hi.
That's cool. I wanted to ask you about the finishes at James Tyler Guitars.
Yeah.
So
yeah. You go.
So how did they come about? I mean, I imagine that it's a proprietary process to get the schmear or some of these different paints, but I mean,
I know relatively how they're done.
It's really interesting. I mean,
what Dave said earlier about, a body and a neck, and then we all kind of do our little thing to it. It's the same thing. It's the same paints. We all buy from the same paint guys and all that. It's just how it developed is everybody's own little signature of it. A lot of people, do other versions of it. But bring up that psychedelic vomit guitar, because that's actually. If you show me your desktop, I'll show you what it is. It's just that lone guitar with the multicolors on it.
Yep, I got it.
So that's the original psychedelic vomit. And what happened is, this is when I first moved back. I was telling you I was in that. Schecter let us stay in their building for a little while, and Jim had. You can see the horn has turquoise and silver. It was a turquoise metallic guitar. And, of course, I already knew about Coma, and I just kind of knew what Mike liked as far as just not new stuff. He liked stuff to be kind of weird and beat up and bizarre. So I was sanding this turquoise guitar, and I was halfway done, and it was like turquoise and silver and wood. And I turned around to Jim, and I said, "Hey, Jim," and I showed it to him, and I said, "I think Mike would like this." And he goes, "Well, he's coming in tomorrow. Just leave it on the corner of your bench right by the door." Mm-hmm. Sure enough, he comes in, and he's like, "Oh, what is this?" Everybody knows Mike. He talks like quiet, and then Jim and him went into the spray booth, and they started coming up with the other colors, and they kind of layered it on, and you sand it, and it would make these kind of different kinds of patterns. And that's pretty straightforward. Anybody who knows paint can figure out how to do that part of it. And that led to Burning Water Guitar, which had a similar vibe, but he was in a band called Burning Water with Abe. Burning Water was with his brother and Carlos Vega and stuff. So he wanted something that looked more like Burning Water, but that same kind of paint scheme. So him and Jim figured out what might look like burning water, like the blues and the stuff. And then just you keep painting, and paint starts doing, it's random, and it just starts doing different stuff. And I wasn't there for the real change in it as it went along, but a painter named Paul Slagle, who sadly passed, is just a wonderful guy. I met him because one of our bass players, who had a Tyler bass, said, "Hey, I got a friend that needs to use some tools. Could we come by after hours?" And I said, "Sure." And Paul comes in, and he's drilling a bass, and he's doing all this stuff. And I'm like, "Do you need a job?" And he's like, "Sure." And he was front of house for Tower Power. And, so he had so he wanted to work part-time. He's like, "Yeah, when I'm not on the road." And so we worked together for a bit. And then he worked with Jim, and he was the painter, and Jim, everything is Jim. Just if any period, it's Tyler's name on the headstock. We've all had to learn that. Many of us have in the industry, like, Dave Phillips, he was a Tyler player before he came out and then worked for Jim for a while. And now he does his own pedal board building and all that kind of stuff. But Paul was great. But everything, you bounce ideas off and it goes into Jim's, and he goes, hey, Charlie, you know what? I like that. Let's try this, or flat out like, no.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I love
I mean, like from what I've seen with the paint, Mark, so I remember being at a shop once, and it's like they're pouring paint on the guitar, like with a Dixie cup. Yeah, and then would hit it with an air gun, and then it would go a different direction. And they pour it, and then they sand through it all, and it magically comes out like, who knows?
Right.
Yeah, when guys,
not predictable.
It takes time, I would imagine. It takes a long time to get that.
It's a bit more, than a black, but it's not that much more complicated than doing a really nice sunburst.
Okay.
Because you can be a little bit random, but that you definitely can't. It's absolutely random in how it turns out, but there's definitely steps that we take that cause that look that now is, even the burning water and the psychedelic vomit. Me personally, I love that first. I liked it when it was big patches, for the vomit. I love the white schmear with the gold is just, amazing looking. And that's probably, I'm going to guess 70-80% is schmears. Like it's really become a thing, so.
Now, do you guys use stainless frets? What are your thoughts on stainless frets on guitars?
We didn't, and then people started bringing it up this last year, and I started talking to Jim about it. And Jim has his few guys that he players that aren't necessarily super well known, but known, and he'll consult with them, and he'll try stuff. So we had a guy who he really wanted stainless steel, and so Jim said, okay, yeah. So we got some. And Jim will take that opportunity to check it out. And Jim felt like there was very, very little difference in sound, but obviously he knew that the wear and tear was going to be
huge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you're shipping a guitar to a guy in Thailand, he's never going to really probably take the time to ship it back to us for a refret.
Right.
Although I am working on, I want to have a repair and restoration place, because I heard you, Dave, talking about you answering the customer service.
Yeah.
Don't go on the forums and ask a question. You're going to get 45 wrong answers. I see it every day. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm in here.
Right.
Just ask me, so, but
yeah, this drives me insane. This literally drives me insane. So the official Friedman Facebook groups, there's a couple, and guys, just email me first before I understand you wanting to get some knowledge about some things, but if you're having a problem with your amp, it's very simple. I'm very accessible. Just email me.
Or your guitar. Like there was a guy today talking about, his Floyd had an issue. I said, I didn't say this. Instead of complaining, I was just like, just email Dave. Dave will take care of you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take care of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll take care of you.
Yeah, I'm taking care of a guitar right now that came in and it was just butchered, and I don't want to describe it at all because I don't want any parties to be, put in the defense. But it was just a certain thing made something it has to be now replaced, and it's shocking. And and a good friend of mine, really close friend, works at Gibson in repair and restoration. And it's just a few guys there at Gibson that they do nothing but work on your old Gibson, like even way where it's your $100,000 Les Paul or whatever. So I want to have that. We wouldn't be that, but just guys can send it to us and we do the refret. So you have your guitar back the way it was when it left in the first place. So anyway, he did the stainless steel frets and he thought there was a little bit of difference in sound, but not enough. It wasn't any more. I love when people obsess about it might be a spankier and brighter, but that you could get that by taking your President's knob on your Deluxe and going, you know.
Right.
So it's a feel thing though too. So it's not something where we're like, oh, this is great, let's do it on everything, because some people like to feel the nickel push back a bit, you know.
Right.
But some people like that slinkiness. So we offer it now, and even since offering it, we've probably had maybe 1 out of 50, you know, requested. And then definitely I see it for those guys overseas who are like, I'm going to get that guitar, and I'm gigging 4 nights a week in my top 40 band in the Philippines. And, you know.
Yeah, you might as well. What about you, Dave? You guys do it?
We do it on the NoHo guitars. I kind of like nickel. I don't know.
Yeah.
I appreciate the idea of the stainless. I think they feel cool. Highly polished nickel though also feels cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a question of how polished you actually get them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little bit more of a traditionalist.
Yeah, Jim is too. It's
and I'm just kind of like, yeah.
Well, I know some guys.
It's been this many years without it. Do we really?
Yeah, some guys. I mean, my cousin had ordered a Crook guitar and asked for stainless frets, and the guy was I forget his first name. You know Crook guitars?
I know of it.
Yeah, Jim Crook, I think. He's the one who originally made the Paisley guitar for Brad Paisley. The Telecasters.
Yep.
And he was like, yeah, man, that's like putting whatever his saying was about it, but it was just like very negative. Like, no, I don't recommend you doing that at all. He still went with it and he did it, but he was like, no, I don't recommend that at all. So,
yeah. And that's so Jim, if Jim would have hated it, like full on just went, it's nothing Jim would ever, I know he would never do it on his guitar. If he full on hated it and it wasn't something that he could stand behind, and I know Dave and guys at this level are all like that. They will check something out. And, but he said, if it was something he hated, we would refuse. But he was like, you know what? It's not offensive. We have to charge a little more. It does wear on tools. Don't let people say, oh, it's not that. No, it screws with files pretty bad. So we had to get sets of files that are just for that. But what you just said is like there'll be a guy, you know, in the Philippines who wants a Tyler, but he's not going to do it because he doesn't want to get a Tyler and then have somebody refret it with stainless there, not because of the price, but just because he wants what we do. So it was like, you know, that too, to just try and help a customer. But if it was something Jim hated, it would be like, sorry, you're going to have somebody else do that because I don't stand behind it. So
yeah. All right, I think we got one last super chat, and we're going to wrap things up.
Cool.
Guido Day, I think I said that right. Guido Day. Hey, Rich, were you at Tyler during the Joe X Guitars period? If so, any insight of how they came about?
I wasn't there, but I'm friends with Jim, so we've talked a lot about it. In fact, we're thinking about bringing back. There was one Joe X guitar that was a rat rod. It looked like a rat rod, and in fact, like the barn find is this crazy green, whole other kind of weird paint thing that we do with worn, weathered hardware and stuff that came from Jim's love of, like, he loves, you know, he's a photographer, so you know, just we have a calendar at work that's just all these old patina cars and, you know, that you find in a barn, you know. So with the Joe X, the same thing, rat rod, just then like just brown and the tire ran over it. We're talking about bringing that back as a Tyler guitar, just because people love that, you know, craziness and then, you know, that kind of thing. But it came about because he was just looking for a way to make you know, in Japan, our guitars go for close to 10 grand. So he was looking for a way to have something that was funny, you know, like our whole Built in America by Assholes sticker, or the Explogo. The Explogo, I don't know for sure, but I feel like it was born out of that Coma guitar headstock, that Fender, when it was a Fender headstock. Jim put on a logo and I forget what happened, but something happened and it was like, so he just put a whole bunch of them on to be funny, and he was ready there was no finish. He just had it ready to go, and Mike comes in to get his guitar and he was thinking Mike was going to like go, what? No. And Mike, I love that. So that stayed on the guitar for quite a while. And I think Explogo's kind of that. So Joe X was a way to do it quickly. You don't have to buff, it's like beat up and fun and a way to get a slightly more affordable guitar. And, it just kind of faded.
I love the Barn Find models too. Those are cool too, man. Painted necks.
Somebody found it was like an old barn. So it had that red and brown vibe, like an old barn in the Midwest. And it was a door and it looked very much like a burning water. And I said, Jim, we should do like a reddish barn find, So, but again, cool. It's all these things that you want to do, but how much time do you have? So.
Michael Nielsen in the house. What's up, guys?
Michael.
M9 is why I met Michael. He had a broken M9 and we met at my Starbucks that I just went to. And
there we go.
That guy, man, what a good player, tone guy.
He's great. Love Michael.
I can tell his trailers every time I'm sitting in a movie. I'm going, yeah, that's Mike. Hey, did you do this one? Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So guys, make sure we're going to wrap things up. Hitting 2-hour mark. I know Dave's got to get to work.
Yeah,
I got to work.
And so make sure you check out Sweetwater, please. This is our affiliate link. I want to thank BV, our moderator, as always, being fantastic.
Thank you.
And our next show will be Ask Dave show. You want to do it next weekend, Dave? Next Saturday? Or you want to take a...
Sure.
Okay.
Think so.
You're around next Saturday? Okay. All right. So check us out next Saturday. You see how things work here? We make plans right on the show.
Absolutely. And if you ask me what our next show is, I never know.
Right. Exactly.
I'm like, Mark, what's our next show?
We got to do dinner soon, Dave.
Yeah, man. Let's do it.
Muzo and Frank. Let's do it.
Oh, I've never been, actually.
Let's go. We'll go.
Okay.
All right.
Nice. Hang on while we say goodbye, Rich.
Yep.
All right. After we get offline.
See you guys.
Guys, take care. We'll talk soon. Sweetwater.com. Make sure you check them out. All right.